I met Lauren at a wedding, of all places. It was my college roommate's big day, and she happened to be the bride's cousin. I wasn't expecting anything that night, just a few drinks, bad dancing, and maybe an early exit. But we ended up seated next to each other at dinner, and we clicked almost instantly. She had this fast wit, sharp eyes, and a confident way of speaking that pulled me in. We talked through the entire meal and ended up closing down the reception together, trading stories on the back steps of the venue while everyone else filtered out. We exchanged numbers, and the next weekend, we went out for drinks. It didn't take long for that to turn into more. Within a month, we were seeing each other regularly, and before I knew it, I was spending more time at her apartment than my own. She worked in tech sales, fast-paced, demanding, and I was in finance at a mid-sized firm. We both had long days, but we always made time for each other. After about a year of dating, we moved in together. Lauren was decisive about it. She always had a plan. I liked that about her. She wasn't one to hesitate. We rented a 2-bedroom place on the edge of the city, close to both our offices. It wasn't fancy, but we made it home. She filled the walls with framed photos and plants. I set up the furniture and handled the bills. We split chores, cooked together a couple times a week, and spent Sunday mornings reading or watching documentaries with coffee in hand. We got married 2 years later. It was a small ceremony, family, close friends, nothing over the top. She planned every detail with surgical precision and loved every second of it. I mostly followed her lead, but I was happy. I really was. Looking back, it felt like the start of something long-term. Something reliable. Something worth putting all your energy into. Not long after the wedding, we bought a house in the suburbs. It wasn't huge, but it had a yard, a spare room we planned to turn into an office, and enough space for us to grow. Lauren was all over the interior design. She had an eye for detail, and I handled the practical stuff. I landscaped the yard, built some shelves, even started thinking about maybe getting a dog. It felt good to come home to a place that was ours. That was our life. Busy work weeks, quiet weekends, takeout dinners, occasional date nights. We had routines, we had laughter, we had plans for the future. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't proud of the life we were building together. And at the time, I believed every part of it was real. After we settled into the new house, life just moved. In the best way. I think there's a kind of peace that comes when things aren't chaotic or dramatic, but just consistent. That's how those early years felt with Lauren. We both worked a lot. Her schedule was packed with client calls, travel, and team meetings, and mine was more structured but still intense, but our home was our calm. We fell into routines that made the days blend together in that comfortable way only real familiarity can. Monday through Friday was all about structure. Early mornings, fast coffee, commute, work. Evenings were slower. We'd cook when we could, order in when we were tired. We had our usual shows we watched together, and if we both had energy, we'd play a board game or share a bottle of wine and talk about our week. Lauren had this way of making even mundane things feel like they mattered. She could go from analyzing a quarterly report to planning the perfect grocery run like it was all part of one seamless project. She was efficient, but she cared. I used to tell people that she ran our house like a business and made it feel like a home. Somehow, she did both. On weekends, we reconnected. Saturday mornings meant sleeping in and waffles, her favorite, and I'd do most of the cooking while she handled the cleanup. We'd hit the local market or walk around the neighborhood. Sunday was usually for errands and prep for the week. She made to-do lists like it was an Olympic sport, and I was always impressed by how much she could pack into a single afternoon. Even when she was buried in tasks, she never felt far away. We were in sync, like a team with different roles but one common goal. We also traveled a little during those early years, mostly long weekends. New Orleans, Denver, a couple coastal towns where we'd rent bikes and take too many pictures. She loved planning itineraries, mapping out every restaurant and museum stop, and I liked tagging along, watching her come alive in a new place. We weren't the overly affectionate couple, not a ton of PDA or constant mushy talk, but there was a comfort to how we existed beside each other. Solid, reliable, easy. Friends often said we looked like the couple who'd figured it out. And maybe, for a while, we had. We talked about the future in the way couples do, kids someday, maybe a bigger house, definitely more travel once work slowed down. We had savings goals, vacation spreadsheets, ideas for home renovations. I remember lying in bed one night, maybe 2 years into our marriage, and thinking, this is it. This is the life I always hoped for. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't cinematic. But it was real. And it was mine. At least, that's what I believed. By our third year of marriage, everything felt like it had settled into place. Not in a boring way, just in that kind of rhythm that comes when you really know someone. We weren't chasing anything anymore. No more rushing to impress or prove ourselves. We just lived. And I was grateful for that. Lauren was thriving in her career. She'd been promoted to a regional sales lead and was handling some of the company's biggest accounts. It meant more travel, longer hours, and the occasional dinner meeting, but she seemed energized by it. I was proud of her. She was sharp, focused, and ambitious in a way that never made me feel small. If anything, she motivated me to level up in my own work. I'd started managing a team of junior analysts by then and was up for a promotion that had been on my radar for years. We celebrated each other's wins without keeping score. Even though her work sometimes meant she was gone overnight, we always made time to check in. Quick video calls, text updates throughout the day, and the occasional, wish you were here photo of a view from her hotel or the dish she ordered for dinner. She was always good at staying connected, even when she was physically somewhere else. At home, things were calm, predictable, in the best way. She kept the house organized down to the last drawer, and I kept it maintained, repairs, mowing, anything that needed fixing. It wasn't divided by gender roles or anything like that. It was just how we worked. She took care of the things that needed planning. I took care of the things that needed tools. We didn't argue about much. If something needed doing, one of us just handled it. We still found time for fun. Dinner parties with friends, the occasional weekend getaway, spontaneous weeknight movie marathons with takeout and the couch pulled a little too close to the TV. We laughed a lot, maybe not constantly, but enough. We had inside jokes, shared playlists, favorite takeout orders we didn't even have to discuss anymore. When we started talking more seriously about kids, it felt like the natural next step, not a decision driven by pressure or obligation, just a sense that we'd built something worth expanding. We didn't set a deadline or get overly clinical about it. We just said, let's see what happens. And when Lauren told me she was pregnant for the first time, I remember sitting down on the edge of the bed, completely overwhelmed in the best way. She was calm about it, excited, but not overly emotional. That was Lauren. She processed things inwardly, didn't like a big fuss. But I could tell she was happy. She showed me the test like she was handing me a secret, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was standing on the edge of something huge and completely unknown. I didn't have any doubts then. Not about the relationship. Not about the future. I thought we were exactly where we were supposed to be. I thought I knew the woman I married. When our first son, Dylan, was born, something inside me changed. I know that sounds cliché, but it's true. I wasn't just a husband anymore. I was a father. And everything from the way I thought about work, to how I spent my weekends, to how I looked at our future shifted. It became less about me and more about us. More about him. Lauren handled pregnancy like she handled everything else, with focus and control. She didn't complain much. Kept working nearly to the end. She had every appointment scheduled, every nursery detail planned out, and a birth plan typed up in 3 versions just in case. When Dylan finally arrived, screaming and perfect, I remember holding him and thinking that nothing in my life had ever felt so immediate, so unfiltered. The months after his birth were hard. Not unusually hard, just the kind of exhausting, overwhelming whirlwind everyone warns you about. Sleepless nights, round-the-clock feeding, tiny clothes multiplying in laundry baskets. I took some time off work and did my best to help, bottles, diaper changes, late-night walks up and down the hallway just to get him to sleep again. Lauren seemed to handle it all in stride. She was tired, sure, but she was efficient. Always had been. We adjusted. Slowly. And eventually things began to feel manageable again. The late-night chaos turned into early morning routines. Dylan started sleeping through the night. Lauren went back to work, part-time at first, and then more. I stepped back into my job, promoted by then, and we fell back into rhythm, only now, we were a family of 3. Life didn't slow down, but it steadied again. And then, just like that, Lauren was pregnant with our second. It wasn't exactly planned. We weren't being careless, but we weren't as cautious either. Dylan was just under 2, and while we hadn't formally talked about timing, we were both surprised when she told me. She wasn't dramatic about it. Lauren never was, but I could tell she was more reserved the second time. Not unhappy, just quieter. I chalked it up to how busy everything had become. Between work, a toddler, and all the physical toll pregnancy takes, it made sense. Still, I remember thinking the excitement didn't feel the same. Not like the first time. We both went through the motions, doctor's visits, baby name lists, updating the nursery, but something about it felt different. Not worse, just automatic. Our second son, Mason, was born just after Dylan's third birthday. Another healthy delivery, another perfect little face I couldn't stop staring at. I remember holding him and feeling that same swell of awe and responsibility. And when I saw Lauren with both boys in her arms, I thought, this is it. This is the life I worked for. We made it. But in the months after Mason's birth, I started to feel a shift. It was subtle, like a door slowly swinging closed in a quiet room. Lauren bounced back quickly, physically, emotionally, at least on the surface. But she was harder to reach. Always tired, always busy, always handling things. She wasn't cold, but she wasn't warm, either. It was like the version of her I'd known had been moved just a few inches out of reach. Still there, but not fully. We were both busy. That's what I told myself. 2 kids, demanding careers, bills, responsibilities. That was all it was, right? It's hard to explain how you start doubting someone you trust. There's rarely a clear moment. It's not like a switch flips and suddenly you're suspicious. It's slower than that. Quieter. A string of moments that feel just a little off, barely enough to notice, until you do. After Mason was born, things between Lauren and me changed. Nothing explosive. Just a subtle kind of distance. She was still doing everything she always did, taking care of the boys, managing the house, staying on top of work, but the warmth in it started to fade. It was like watching someone move through the motions of your life without fully being in it. She went back to work a little earlier the second time, which didn't surprise me. Lauren had never been the type to stay still. But there was something different about her schedule this time around. More out-of-town meetings. More client dinners. More nights where she came home just a bit later than I expected. She always had an explanation, and they always made sense. But the pattern started to wear on me. One night, I noticed she had a second phone charger plugged into the wall in the guest room. I asked about it, casually, and she said it was for a backup phone she used for work, client stuff, she said. I didn't push it. I'd never been the snooping type. I respected her space and always believed people deserved privacy. But I also couldn't stop thinking about how she used to leave her phone out on the counter without a second thought. Now it was always in her pocket or face down. It buzzed a lot more than it used to. I'd come into her room and she'd pause mid-text. She'd smile like everything was normal and change the subject. I told myself it was nothing. We were both exhausted. Maybe I was just reading into things. Then came the weekend trip. She said it was for a leadership retreat, 3 days out of town, all expenses paid, part of a new mentorship program through her company. Totally believable. She even sent me the itinerary. But something about how quickly she packed, how little she told me about the people going. It didn't sit right. I brushed it off, watched the kids, kept the house running while she was gone. But I remember sitting on the couch that Friday night, Mason asleep on my chest and Dylan passed out from a sugar crash on the floor, and wondering why I suddenly felt alone in a marriage I used to feel anchored by. When she came back Sunday night, she was all smiles. Told me about the speakers, the networking, the ideas she was excited to try. She hugged the boys tightly, kissed me quickly, talked about how exhausted she was. That night, while she was in the shower, her phone lit up on the nightstand. Just a preview of a message, no name. Just a string of emojis. I looked away. I didn't touch it. But something turned in my gut and never turned back. I still didn't think anything concrete was happening. I told myself I was being paranoid. That this was what parenthood did to people. That maybe we'd grown apart a little, but we'd come back around. That's how relationships work, right? But deep down, a question had started to take root. What if she's not who I think she is anymore? And once it's there, you can't unask it. I tried not to let the doubt consume me. I really did. There were days, whole stretches of them, where things felt mostly normal again. I'd come home from work. The boys would be running around the living room. Lauren would be tossing together something for dinner while half listening to a podcast. We'd eat, clean up, watch something, and go to bed with a routine kiss goodnight. Familiar, predictable, almost like nothing had changed. But underneath the rhythm, something had cracked. I found myself watching her differently, not in a suspicious or controlling way, just closely, like I was trying to relearn someone I used to know by heart. She smiled less, or at least, it felt like her smiles didn't come from the same place anymore. She talked a lot about work, new initiatives, corporate changes, internal politics. But the way she talked about it, it was like a performance. Like she was playing the role of a wife, giving a download of her day. and I kept nodding along, even when I couldn't shake the feeling that there were pages missing from the script. One night, she mentioned a colleague I hadn't heard her talk about before, Jason. Just casually, in passing, said he'd helped her prep for a presentation. Then she moved on. But over the next couple weeks, his name started coming up more. Always casually. Always a side note. Jason had that same idea, or Jason said the client might push the timeline. Never enough to make a thing of, but just enough to notice. I asked once if he was new. She didn't look up from her laptop. Sort of. He came over from another division, she said. Then she changed the subject. There were other small shifts too. She started working out more, twice as much as she had in the past. She said it helped with stress. Maybe it did. But she also started buying new clothes. Subtle stuff. Not flashy. Just different. A little more form-fitting. A little more carefully chosen. One night, I found a receipt in the laundry, dry cleaning. I didn't even know she was dry cleaning anything. When I asked about it, she said it was just a blazer she liked to keep in rotation. She smiled too quickly. I let it go. I wasn't looking for reasons not to trust her. If anything, I was trying to find excuses to trust her, to believe that I was imagining the space growing between us, that we were just in a long season of stress, that this was what happens when you've been together for over a decade and life pulls you in opposite directions for a while. But the distance wasn't shrinking. We weren't arguing. We weren't fighting. But we weren't connecting either. It was like we were walking parallel paths in the same house, close enough to touch, but never quite reaching out. And the kids, they didn't notice, of course. They were too young. But they filled the space between us in a way I didn't know how to fix. They gave us something to focus on, to manage, to maintain. But they didn't bring us back together. One night, after the boys were asleep, I sat outside on the back patio and just stared at the dark yard. I tried to imagine us 10 years from now. Tried to picture her sitting beside me in that same chair. Tried to feel something solid beneath the life we'd built. But all I felt was a question I still couldn't answer. What changed? And why can't I ask her? Some days I still convinced myself nothing was wrong. That's the weirdest part. Even after all the subtle signs, even after all the unanswered questions, I kept trying to return to normal. I wanted to believe it was just stress, that we were both spread too thin, that after 2 kids, long hours, and a dozen years together, maybe this was just what marriage looked like sometimes. But other days, it felt like I was standing in a room I used to know, and someone had rearranged all the furniture while I was sleeping. Lauren had become more distant, not cold, not angry, just unreachable. The kind of distance that's harder to point at because it doesn't come with yelling or slamming doors. She was still doing the right things, making lunchboxes, remembering birthdays, responding to emails at 10 p.m., but I started to wonder if she was ever really there. If she was moving through our life like it was a role she was performing rather than something she was living. It started to get to me in ways I couldn't admit out loud. I became more distracted at work. I found myself rereading the same paragraphs in emails. When I was with the boys, I was present, but behind my eyes, something else was always running in the background, like a second tab left open. One night, I asked her if she was happy. We were in the kitchen. She was loading the dishwasher. The question just came out before I could think better of it. She paused, blinked at me like I'd asked if it was raining outside. Then she said, "Of course. Aren't you?" I didn't answer right away. I just shrugged. I guess I don't know anymore. She closed the dishwasher and wiped her hands. "Well, maybe you should try appreciating what you have," she said. Her voice was flat. No warmth. No real anger, either. Just dismissive. That answer stuck with me for days. Around that same time, she started keeping her phone on silent more often, face down on the nightstand. She said the notifications were getting annoying. I wanted to believe that. But I started noticing how often she took calls in the other room or stepped outside for air while texting. It started to feel like she was living a second life just outside my line of sight. One afternoon, while she was out running errands, I opened the browser on our shared tablet to pull up a recipe. The last search was for a hotel I didn't recognize, downtown, expensive, boutique style. The kind of place you booked for an anniversary or an affair. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I closed the tab and told myself I wasn't going to be the guy who snoops. But the doubt wouldn't leave me alone. It wasn't just the hotel. It was the perfume I hadn't smelled in years that suddenly showed up on her jacket. It was the gym bag in the trunk that never made it into the house. It was the way she used to touch me absent-mindedly while we talked. And now her hands were always full of something else, her phone, a dish towel, the baby. There wasn't a single moment that proved anything. No smoking gun. Just a mountain of little things piling up behind the locked door in my mind. And I kept telling myself, maybe it's nothing. But I'd started to wonder what I'd do if it wasn't. I didn't go looking for the truth. Not at first. I wasn't the kind of guy who checked phones, read through messages, or tracked GPS locations. I believed in privacy. I believed in trust. I believed in the person I married. But there's a difference between choosing trust and being afraid to face what you already know. And somewhere along the way, I crossed that line without even realizing it. The idea of a paternity test didn't come to me as revenge or paranoia. It started from something much smaller, an offhand comment from our pediatrician at Dylan's routine checkup. She was going over some medical history questions and paused when I answered one about a hereditary condition that runs on my side. She looked confused and said Dylan's markers hadn't indicated anything of the sort. At the time, it didn't raise any alarms. Kids take after their mothers sometimes. Genes don't always express themselves predictably. But that comment sat with me. It lodged itself in the back of my mind like a splinter, small, almost invisible, but impossible to ignore once you know it's there. A week later, I ordered a paternity kit online. It felt surreal, opening that box in our kitchen, swabbing the inside of my son's cheek while he laughed and squirmed, having no idea what it all meant. I told myself it was just to ease my mind, just to rule something out so I could sleep better. The results came back 10 days later. I opened the email alone, late at night, sitting at the desk in our bedroom while Lauren was downstairs on another catch-up call with a coworker I'd never met. I wasn't nervous when I clicked the link, just numb. I wasn't prepared for the words. Probability of paternity, 0%. I read it again. And again. The words didn't change. The world didn't tilt or explode. It just slowed. Everything inside me went still. My chest felt hollow. My ears rang. I remember staring at those numbers and thinking, this must be a mistake. This has to be wrong. I checked the date. Checked the test ID. Checked everything. Then I checked Mason's. Same result. Neither of them were mine. Both of our boys. The children I held in the hospital with tears in my eyes. The babies I rocked to sleep. The toddlers I chased through the backyard. The sons I loved with my whole heart. They weren't mine. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't move. For hours, I sat at that desk in the dark while the house stayed quiet and the weight of it all pressed down on me like a hand over my mouth. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the realization that I had been living in someone else's fiction for over a decade. That every birthday, every milestone, every late-night diaper change, I'd done all of it while she looked me in the eye and let me believe a lie. 10 years. 2 children. And I didn't even know who they really belonged to. When Lauren finally came upstairs, I didn't say anything. She kissed me lightly on the shoulder, barely noticed how still I was, and disappeared into the bathroom to get ready for bed. The shower turned on. Steam filled the room. And I sat there, staring at the screen, whispering one word to myself over and over again. Why? The next morning, I didn't make coffee. I didn't kiss her goodbye. I didn't check the boys' lunchboxes or their backpacks or whether the dishwasher had been emptied. I got dressed in silence, let the sun rise without drawing the blinds, and sat at the kitchen table staring at nothing while she moved around the house like it was just another Thursday. She had no idea what was coming. No idea that the lie she'd carried so casually for a decade was already unraveling in my hands. I didn't explode. I didn't scream. When she came into the room, makeup half done and phone in hand, I just looked at her. She gave me a distracted smile and said, "Can you pick up Mason from daycare tonight? I've got a late meeting." That's when I spoke. "No, you can ask his father to do it." She froze. Her whole body. Stillness I'd never seen from her before. "What?" she said, laughing awkwardly like she'd misheard me. I repeated, standing now, voice steady. "You can ask his father. Or Dylan's. Since neither of them are mine." Everything in her face shifted in slow motion. Confusion, then panic, then this stunned sort of blankness like she'd just been dropped into cold water. She didn't deny it. That's what hit me first. She didn't say, "What are you talking about?" or "That's ridiculous." She just stood there, mouth parted, searching for a sentence that wouldn't come. "You did a test," she finally said. Flat. Defeated. "I did," I said. "And it told me the truth. Something you were never going to do." She stepped back like I'd slapped her, like the truth itself stung worse than anything I could have said. "I didn't mean for it to happen this way." "That doesn't matter," I snapped, and this time I didn't hold back. You let me raise them. You let me believe they were mine. You let me love them like a father while you slept with someone else. For years, she opened her mouth, and I could see the lies building, the excuses lining up behind her teeth. But I didn't want them. I didn't care about her reasons or what she thought she could explain away. I walked past her, into the bedroom, and started pulling open drawers. Get out, I said. Wait, what are you doing? I said get out. Now. You don't mean this, she said, her voice rising. You don't get to just throw me and the kids out. They're not my kids, I shouted. You made sure of that. And I don't owe you anything anymore. She followed me as I dragged her suitcase from the closet and started stuffing clothes into it. No folding, no care. She tried to grab my hands, pull things back, but I pushed past her and threw open the front door. Everything she owned hit the porch one bag at a time. Then the rest went out the window. The coat she always wore, her work bag, a drawer full of makeup and notebooks. The boys were at daycare, thankfully. I didn't want them to see any of it. She cried. She yelled. She begged. Then she threatened. She said I was overreacting. She said it wasn't what I thought. She said she loved me. I ignored it all. And then I picked up her phone from the counter, the one she never let out of her sight, and opened it. No passcode. She must have forgotten in the chaos. It took all of 2 minutes to find him. The man who'd helped raise children that weren't mine. The man who'd spent years in my place while I paid the bills, tucked them in, lived the lie. I called him. He didn't answer, but I left a message. She knows I know, and now I know who you are. I turned to her as she stood there, red-faced and shaking. You're done. With me. With this house. With everything. Then I shut the door, locked it, closed the blinds. And when she banged on the door, sobbing, I didn't move. I didn't answer her texts. I didn't answer when she called 30, 40, 50 times. I let the silence do what my words never could. The house was too quiet at first. After I kicked Lauren out, there were no footsteps upstairs, no laughter from the living room, no toys underfoot. It was just me and the silence, and it was brutal. The quiet had weight to it. At night, it settled on my chest and stayed there, like a presence that wasn't going anywhere. I didn't feel relief. Not right away. I felt hollow. Not because I regretted what I did, because I didn't, but because I had to admit how much of my life had been built on a lie. A lie I'd lived in. A lie I'd defended without knowing it. 10 years, 2 kids, and 1,000 little moments that I thought were mine, only to learn they'd never really belonged to me at all. In the weeks that followed, I shut down everything that reminded me of her. I took down the family photos. I canceled our joint accounts. I had the locks changed and filed for divorce through an attorney who didn't ask too many questions. I gave short answers to friends who called and didn't respond at all to the ones who asked, "Are you sure?" I was sure, more sure than I'd ever been about anything in my life. And I was done explaining that to people who still thought marriage could be worked through, no matter the betrayal. Lauren kept reaching out, for a while. Texts, calls, emails with subject lines like, "We need to talk," and "Please, just one conversation." I never responded. What could she possibly say that would change anything? She had 10 years to tell the truth, and didn't. She had 10 years to come clean before I found out on my own. And now she wanted to explain? No. I was done. Completely. I didn't want her voice in my head anymore. I didn't want her version of the story. I didn't care how sorry she was. Sorry doesn't rebuild trust. Sorry doesn't rewrite DNA. The kids' God. The kids. That's what broke me the most. I hadn't seen them since the day I found out. Not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't. Not yet. They weren't mine. And every instinct in my body was still wired to think they were. I still woke up some mornings half expecting to hear them running down the hall, still paused when I saw a tiny jacket in the closet I hadn't cleared out yet. But I knew that staying close to them would only prolong the damage. They'd grow up with questions I couldn't answer. Maybe one day I'd write them a letter explaining everything. Maybe. But for now, I kept my distance. It was the only way I knew how to let go. Eventually, I left the house. I couldn't live there anymore. It was too full of ghosts, too full of memories I no longer trusted. I sold it and moved into a smaller place across town, clean, modern, quiet. No kids' toys, no family portraits, no reminders. Just space. Space to start again. It didn't happen all at once, but eventually I started living again. I focused on my work. I picked up new hobbies, simple things that kept my hands busy and my mind clear. I started running in the mornings. I went back to reading. I started saying yes when friends asked me to hang out, even if I didn't feel like it. And one day, out of nowhere, I met someone. Her name was Claire. We met through a mutual friend at a weekend barbecue. She was warm, easy to talk to, and didn't ask too many personal questions up front. That alone made me feel like I could breathe. We talked about books, food, travel. We laughed. It wasn't love at first sight. It wasn't dramatic. It was just easy, which, after everything, felt like a miracle. I didn't tell her everything right away. I wasn't ready. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was performing. I didn't feel like I was hiding. I could sit across from her at dinner and just be a man, not a man holding up a collapsing house. I'm not healed. Not fully. Maybe I never will be. But I'm no longer stuck in the wreckage. I'm building something new. Something that's mine. And this time, it starts with the truth. It's strange how silence can feel like grief and then, eventually, like peace. I don't hear from Lauren anymore. After months of unanswered calls and unreturned messages, she stopped trying. Whether that was because she gave up, or because she found someone else to fill the silence, I don't know. And I don't care. That chapter of my life has been closed, sealed, and buried. Sometimes people ask if I ever got closure. I used to think closure came from answers, from explanations. But what I've learned is that sometimes, closure is just choosing not to let someone explain themselves anymore. Sometimes, it's saying, you knew what you were doing. And I know enough. I haven't seen Dylan or Mason. Not once since that day. That's a pain I don't talk about often. It's hard to explain to people who haven't lived it, that line between what you feel and what's real. I still think about them. I still wonder if they remember the bedtime stories, the backyard soccer games, the way I used to hum when I rocked them to sleep. I hope they do. Even if I wasn't their father by blood, I was their dad in every way that mattered, at least for a while. And I don't regret that. Not for a second. They were innocent in all this. I remind myself of that when the guilt creeps in. Claire and I are still seeing each other. We're not rushing anything. After what I went through, she's patient in a way I never knew I needed. She listens without trying to fix. She gives me space without making me feel like I've disappeared. I told her everything, eventually. I didn't plan to, but it came out one night when we were sitting on her couch after dinner, wine glasses half full, music playing softly in the background. She didn't recoil. She didn't pity me. She just took my hand and said, "You're still standing." That says more than anything else. And she's right. I am still standing. There are still days when the past tries to sneak in, when I see a father with his sons and feel a tightness in my chest I can't quite name. When I wonder how I didn't see it, how I didn't ask more questions, how I let someone I trusted rewrite my life without my consent. But those moments are fewer now. And they don't take me under like they used to. They pass, like weather. And I let them. I've started to believe in good things again. Not in some perfect fairy tale ending, but in the quiet, durable kind of good. The kind that builds slowly. The kind that stays. I wrote this because I needed to get it out. And maybe because I know someone out there is where I was, sitting in silence, feeling the cracks but afraid to look too closely. To that person, I'll say this: your instincts matter. Your peace matters. You don't need someone's permission to reclaim your own life. The truth may hurt, but it will never break you like a lie will.